Beyond the forbidden.
Oh man, this is actually the fallen angels that are behind this entire phenomenon that we call aliens. Those are just the avatars that have been created to interact with us in the 3D, possibly even to circumvent the very rules that we're discussing right now. You know, the demonology rules, and you can't cross the salt, and a prayer should send these things away. They don't have to send away some biological avatar that was created exactly for this purpose, to snatch women out of their beds and to actually circumvent the entire process with the genetic manipulation that they're doing now, which is much more sophisticated than Genesis 6.
If the phenomenon continues that guide archetype, it's only to deconstruct the malevolent nature of the account, right? Where they're doing it to you because they're doing it for you. I've yet to, at least in my career, I've yet to encounter a case study where the guy says, oh yeah, that was really bad. Can't believe that happened to you. And so what's disturbing about these case studies is that the entire archetype's weaponized sometimes. And it's designed, again, when you're using these interfaces, even with Jesus and military, all of it, designed to regulate human behavior to a point where you do this, and then when you start pushing back, that's when, at least in my perspective, another intelligence shows up that had been operating that archetype the entire time.
Why do they need us at all? Why aren't they just doing artificial in the petri dish, send them into the womb, into their artificial wombs with that liquid, and let them grow from there? Why do they need us? They take our human eggs, they take the human sperm, they take alien so-called DNA, they put it all together. But why do they need the human woman and the human womb, and even an artificial human womb for women who have had hysterectomies? And now,
to where they can control. They don't, again, we're thinking psychics, okay, right? Psychics, no. What if that is the modern medium? And in that way, all they have to do is possess it to communicate. And I think it's a profound point that Fringe made, because there is, I have this kind of cognitive dissonance where I'm trying to take the phenomena and say, okay, you've got to play by these rules, right? I'm going to say the name of Jesus, you're going to run into the shadows. And when that doesn't happen, I know you were on Israeli News Live, Fringe, and you hit it on the head, where people start to, weaponize that situation, make you feel incredibly inferior, and just, it's ignorant. Forgive me, it's ignorant, because they don't get it. But it's very possible, again, that this entire self-replication of species has been designed to create the biological medium, something they can possess and operate through.
were our religions all created by the negative NHI? No, I don't think so. I think they have been hijacked. I think they are used as a control system. I think, so it's been my experience with the negative side of the phenomenon that they aren't very creative in and of themselves. They're usually hijacking something else. They're taking truth and turning it into, they're using 80% truth and 20% lies for their own benefit. So was the entirety of religion created by them as a control system? I don't think so. I think that they've hijacked it and used it for themselves. I think they take the base reality and then turn it around for themselves. Just like they use New Age religion and New Age experiences. Is there a basis in truth for some of the practices of the New Age? Yes, I believe there is, but they hijack it and they tell us, hey, go out and meditate on a mountain and call in a spaceship. This is what proves that you have a higher consciousness. And in reality, what you're doing is you're literally making a deal with the devil. And I know that is strong language for some people, probably many people.
I love it.
And so we've now taken the human qualities, the human soul, we've put them into a hybrid body and essentially trapped the human forever, because the hybrid soul, or the human soul trapped in a hybrid body, has no capacity for the things that make us human. It's not going to search for God. It's not going to search for anything outside of the alien agenda. So I love Nigel Kerner. I love the idea of the whole soul trap, the whole prison planet thing. And this is how I think it makes sense to me. I actually get a bunch of downloads on it, but again, I try not to trust that too much. But they do lead me down some rabbit holes. So what I'm looking at is, what is the ultimate agenda? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And I think it's a possibility that it is literally the ultimate win to the game, to trap human souls inside these hybrid bodies, and game over.
Become a member on Patreon to get full access to all exclusive content. A few of the perks is the full-length ad-free video version of the interviews, face-to-face interviews, bonus shows, and behind-the-scenes footage. You will also receive the video interview way in advance, before the audio-only interview gets dropped on all platforms. Sign up and become a member today for only $3 a month. The link is in the description.
You guys are going to be much more familiar with the history, with who's who, than I am. I'm fairly new to it. I come just from my own abduction perspective, my own experiences, a lot of the abduction research, but even that, you guys could potentially have more information than I do. So all these people in the field, I'm not going to be as familiar with them as you all are, but it's now been my experience that they know exactly what this is. I think the extraterrestrial hypothesis is dead. Now, I was not around when it was alive, so I can't really say that for certain, right? But just since I've been around, I was shocked at the information I was coming across that showed exactly where my own thoughts were going. Because I started out here believing that I was dealing with extraterrestrials. And before finding ufology, before finding the abduction research, before finding other people this was happening too, I, through my own experiences, came to my own realization that these are not extraterrestrials at all. And they have a nefarious agenda as far as I'm concerned. And when I found ufology and I found the abduction research, I was shocked that other people were saying the very same thing that I was. It's actually interesting when you realize the information that they have, and I think they know exactly what this is. That's my personal opinion.
Yes,
it wasn't until Nathaniel where I really started, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, however long it's been, that I really started diving in deeper, because I've always been an open book that maybe we're dealing with both. I don't know. And I've always fathom the possibility that they are here, just like Nick Redfern gave me the book Crypto Terrestrials by Mac Tony's, his personal copy 6-7 years ago. That's that picture, of my profile, my Zoom picture was in his apartment. He gave me his personal copy, and that's when I really started diving down that rabbit hole, where that maybe we are dealing with something that's more here, domestic, home, that's been here for a long time. But the only thing that and one of y'all can lead with this. The only thing I don't understand is, or could it be two things though? Like, could it be just like John Keel, the ultra terrestrials or interdimensionals, whatever, on top of things living in our own backyard here, maybe deep underground, or just in a different bedroom within our house here in our reality here? You know what I mean? Could we be dealing with different facets? That's the only thing where I'm hitting the crossroads right now. That I believe that what y'all say, Mac Tony's, so many others, but could we also be dealing with things that are coming from out there, or through like John Keel's work, ultra terrestrials, interdimensionals, whatever, that's not really in our reality, but they're coming from other parallels or somewhere else? Who knows? I guess we'll start with you, Nathaniel, and then Fringe can go from there.
Problem is, if it is a singular intelligence, it would have diversified its identity in our eyes, playing through the archetypes of the guide, which is you think about it, that subject needs to be tackled more often in the field, because and I've witnessed Fringe talk about this as well, and I have too at my shows, where you have cases like Ted Rice, where the guide was an archetype. It was quite literally the phenomenon using that role as a way to control and modify human behavior. And then when the negative abductions are remembered through hypnosis and regression, goes back to the guides. I need some clarity. I need context. And it's not just him, but other cases I've collected throughout the years where if the phenomenon continues that guide archetype, it's only to deconstruct the malevolent nature of the account, right? Where they're doing it to you because they're doing it for you. I've yet to, at least in my career, I've yet to encounter a case study where the guide says, oh yeah, that was really bad. Can't believe that happened to you. And so what's disturbing about these case studies is that the entire archetype's weaponized sometimes. And it's designed, again, when you're using these interfaces, even with Jesus and military, all of it, designed to regulate human behavior to a point where you do this, and then when you start pushing back, that's when, at least in my perspective, another intelligence shows up that had been operating that archetype the entire time. And my work right now in the phenomenology is deciphering. I put this on X. I only have like 4 followers. I was like, I'm taking it off. It doesn't really matter at this point.
Wait, people are super excited that you're on Twitter now. So
oh, really?
you're going to get a lot more followers than that. Yeah.
Wow. I can't, honestly, it's a lot of, the field is riddled with drama, and I don't have anything to do with it, right? But my work right now and some of the other individuals I've worked with in the past in phenomenology is trying to decipher between the archetype and the proto-intelligence. And when Whitley Strieber was on Danny Jones' podcast, he was telling the truth. There are people that are being influenced malevolently by entities that may or may not play by any rules whatsoever. But that's my perspective.
Go ahead, Fringe.
So it took me a while to realize that, to me, and I was very interested in listening to Nathaniel today. I listened to him on one of your shows, Michael, and then I listened to him on another show. And it was the first time I actually came across your hypothesis of this is all the same thing, right? It's a proto-intelligence.
Working hypothesis.
Working hypothesis. So I had already decided, and it took me, I'm 55 years old today. It took me until I was maybe 52, 53 to realize that the various aspects of the phenomenon that I had been dealing with my entire life was all the same thing. And so I do think there are different aspects of it, different presentations of it.
Right.
And people will argue with me here, and I could be wrong. But I think at the core of it, it's all the same thing. So it's different manifestations of the same phenomenon with an O-N, singular.
Correct.
And so, and I do not discount, however, the possibility of a Mac Tony's. I love that book, by the way. And as soon as I came across his work, this has also been my experience. Now, I can't trust my experiences, right? I don't trust any of them. I don't trust anything they tell me. I don't think they trust anything they download into my brain. I don't trust anything they show me. But this whole idea of a breakaway civilization, I don't discount that part of it. Is there a civilization that perhaps has survived one of these cataclysmic earth changes in the past that did have some technology? So I look at it this way. Let's just say there's a good and an evil, just to put it in a black and white terms. There might be some gray areas as well, but for black and white, let's just say there's a good and an evil. Let's say that the good side preserved its progeny through cataclysms, even if we just look at Noah's flood, something that's been documented in over 500 cultures around the world. Whatever you want to call it, what prevented the dark or the evil side from also preserving its progeny? So we could very well, in my opinion, have a civilization that survived, and they have more technology because they have been handed technology. They have exchanged technology for their very souls, in my personal opinion, but they've exchanged technology for something, right? Maybe for their own survival, I don't know. I think this is something that's upon us again. If we're looking at another cataclysmic earth change, we already have our so-called elite with the ability and the resources to preserve themselves through the next cataclysm. And they're planning to do it. Whether they survive or not, I don't know. But what happens when that little breakaway civilization comes out on the other side? So I definitely entertain the idea of a breakaway, because a lot of my own personal experiences point to that. So I think it could be more than one thing, but at the core of it, it's all the same source, if that makes sense, hopefully.
So you went back to Nathaniel's. He loves looking into the ancient past. And I asked this to Philip Kinsella.
Kinsella.
The one where you bailed out on me where you got sick. So
It happens, brother.
But so could the creation of religion be one of the ultimate tools by these non-human entities in the ancient times to deceive the human race by symbolically masquerading behind these religions that they created? It could be no different than an entity throughout time hiding behind different masks, such as angels, demons, fairies, goblins, jinns, ETs, just to name a few. Did these non-human entities create religions to keep the human race obedient and in a constant state of servitude, while we show the classic case of Stockholm syndrome, in which we align with and agree with our captors and oppressors? On top of that, what if religion was all incrementally created to harness our energy to these non-human entities? We pray, we meditate, etc. Where is that subconscious or conscious energy going to? Could this be a huge and covert deception by these non-human entities? Go ahead, Nathaniel, and Fringe, you can take it from there after that.
There does seem to be, again, we're still, at least I am and others are looking
I
for
know
new
that seems
vocabulary.
blasphemous, but you know,
Well,
like
it
Oh,
shouldn't.
not at all. We have to think
shouldn't.
about it.
Yeah. Go ahead, man.
So there's a common thematic element that's interwoven throughout all of the fabric of the paranormal. And it's replete with the alien, the ETH, the demonic, and the guides, even with some of the more nuts and bolts materialistic ufologists. And that is the rite of conjuring, the rite of posturing yourself at a location, not of our choosing, but of the phenomenons, out into, like, for the desert, like Tim Taylor's doing, and building an altar, performing some kind of ritual to where this intelligence incarnates. Now, this again points to a singular phenomenon that does prefer certain things. It's very strange. If you get into early demonology, that's exactly what they were doing. It's idolatry in Mesopotamia, where they were constructing their altars within the proximity of this phenomenon, to where they would see manifestations and incarnations, and then they would use that to kind of direct their incantations. So one of the phrases I've been using as of late to kind of connect antiquity with modernity is that, yes, the incarnations may be modern, but the incantations are ancient. And it's a striking phenomenon. If you look at Tim Taylor, right? He's the guy that is in the desert in New Mexico, using these incantations to contact non-human intelligence. And they're allegedly, this is fascinating too, allegedly giving him insights, technological advances, where he patents it, and then, transfers that to, it's all the same. But my point here is that regardless of how the phenomenon wants to incarnate as, not only are we finding it responding to the same incantations, we're finding a lot of these entities together at the same places at the same time. And this was done with the skull experiment in England, when there was allegedly in contact with deceased ancestors, and they're conversing with them through almost, it would be considered necromancy at times. And then next thing you know, they put a tripod up, leave the room for the night, come back the next morning, there's an alien staring at the lens. So this speaks to, at least from my perspective, not only does it appear to be a singular source, but this singular source appreciates some things more than others, and it responds to certain practices. And I think more than anything, that would point back to religion, or some sort of interest in what I have been told, which we'll cover this in a second, has been worship.
You want to expand on that, Fringe?
So you asked, is it being used as a control system? And I'm not sure if you actually asked this, but I think along with that question always comes the question, did the NHI fabricate or create all of our religions as a control system? I think that's kind of part and parcel, goes along with that question as well. And so I think that there are two sides to this. I don't think, so when I'm saying I think it all goes back to a singular source, I'm going to part it off as an evil and a good, as a negative and a positive, however you want to look at it, whatever words you want to use. I see it in two different ways. So I think this negative source is one, singular, and I think the positive source is a singular. So, but I think they're two different things. Where Nathaniel, I'm not sure if you think it's all the same thing or not.
No, I believe the negative is. I agree with you there.
So we're saying
yeah.
actually the same thing.
Correct.
And so were our religions all created by the negative NHI? No, I don't think so. I think they have been hijacked. I think they are used as a control system. I think so it's been my experience with the negative side of the phenomenon that they aren't very creative in and of themselves. They're usually hijacking something else. They're taking truth and turning it into, they're using 80% truth and 20% lies for their own benefit. So was the entirety of religion created by them as a control system? I don't think so. I think that they've hijacked it and used it for themselves. I think they take the base reality and then turn it around for themselves. Just like they use New Age religion and New Age experiences. Is there a basis in truth for some of the practices of the New Age? Yes, I believe there is, but they hijack it and they tell us, hey, go out and meditate on a mountain and call in a spaceship. This is what proves that you have a higher consciousness. And in reality, what you're doing is you're literally making a deal with the devil. And I know that is strong language for some people, probably many people.
I love it.
But that's what my thinking is. And so have they been hijacked? Yes, I think so. But most of what the negative side does is not original. It's something that they hijack. And so in my personal experiences, and this is very, very complicated, it's something I don't usually get into, and it's very difficult to dive really deep into this because this happened over the period of at least a few years. The negative entities tried their best to get me away from the religion of my birth, which is Christianity. Now, I think I have a bit of a wider view of Christianity than I did before the last couple of years, but that they tried so hard and they pulled out every single stop and they sent me down every single rabbit hole. And I knew at that time I was literally in a battle for my own soul. And I knew I had to make a choice. I've made my choice and I'm not going back on it. If I made the wrong choice, I will pay the consequences for that. And that's okay. But their interest in that was fascinating to me. And so now, could they have, pulled a reverse psychology and I'm actually on the wrong track and they want me to stay there? It's possible. But the totality of the circumstances of just my own personal experiences, which again, it's very difficult to even translate it into words, tells me that they did not want me to make that choice. In fact, I have been punished for not caving to what they wanted me to do. And so that I can only say from a personal experience. It probably doesn't help a lot of people, but I truly do believe there is a positive side, there is a negative side, and it's literally a cosmic battle that has been going on for thousands of years at least for the human soul. I'll go right back to, I don't know who said it, if it was Heiser or Missler or both, that we are both the pawns and the prize in this game. We are used as their proxies. We carry out their chosen agenda, and yet we're actually the prize at the end of the game. It's
good.
It's fascinating to say the least.
Oh, I think it's fascinating. Absolutely. It's awesome.
You said something that how I probably would, if I could go back, would rephrase that question that I brought to both of you. Instead of using created, hijacking. hijacked. That's exactly what I think probably has taken place. Um, so since we're kind of back in the ancient times, I guess, if these non-human entities or whatever force is behind them have been here for thousands of years, maybe they have a connection to the fallen angels. Maybe these entities are actually the Nephilim and the offspring of these fallen angels and women of earth. In Genesis 6:2, the sons of God saw the daughters of humans were beautiful and they married any of them they chose. So, can these entities, aka Nephilim or whatever they are, still be attracted to women of today? Because women do seem to get abducted a lot more than that of men. Maybe that's another reason why women in Islam and other countries in the Middle East cover their bodies from head to toe. Maybe there is a subconscious trauma or conditioning that has survived and has been passed down since the biblical days. And these cultures over there knew that the best way to keep from attracting these entities is to cover one's body, to dress modestly and cover oneself in order to prevent the attracting of these demonic entities. Go ahead, Nathaniel, and we'll go, and Fringe can take it from there.
Well, at least some of the literature I've read, and not just within the context of Christianity, but what are called contemporary sources. Early demonologists didn't understand that, because the reason they believed they were sexually attracted to women was because they copulated with them. And then it opens up the door to they have their own seed. And if they had their own seed, why is it creating hybrids? And so that's where my research kind of led me with respect to incubi literature and case studies. But we're talking about that subject, it's impossible not to know the esoteric rituals that these beings are performing on specifically women. I mean, even if you get into demonology, I think the latest data, I think it was like 90% of their interests with our species had to do purely with women, monitoring fertility from the youth to the hysterectomy. And so it was designed around the self-replication of species. And some of the evidence I've collected was that if they are Nephilim, then these aren't people that are worshiping demons. They are practitioners in and of themselves. Matter of fact, I just got a message the other day of a woman who was being groomed by one of these entities. And she went to pray. And she said that she got a scar on her arm. She felt a burning sensation. And yeah, she took a picture of it, sent it to me. But again, it's also worthy to know that some of the incubi cases with women, obviously, the entities were carving rituals, like ritualistic sigils underneath their eyelids and on their bodies. Now, according to the demonological model within Christianity, that shouldn't be happening, because there's a distance, there's a line of partition between practitioners and the demons themselves. And so this is why, again, it's important to highlight the esoteric value that is literally through the phenomenon. And with that said, yes, their interest has been within not just the female anatomy, but specifically within fertility. And I had one case years ago where about a 6-year-old woman, she said about 10 years prior to when she reached out to me, she was being abducted by the same entities that were taking her from her youth. And she said that she had a hysterectomy. And then one night they manifested while she was in bed, began to form tests on her. And they realized they could not self-replicate any longer. And that's when the phenomenon stopped. But if, again, were they attracted to, perhaps, or it could have been purely the concept of self-replicating. But I don't want to ramble, guys. I like to ramble a lot.
Oh, you're all good. Go ahead, French.
I do a lot of rambling myself. So you started with the Genesis 6 thing, and that is important to me because I feel like I was born a Christian in this life, and whether there are any other lives, I don't even know. And I tell people I had the faith. I had as much faith as maybe even the disciples who saw Christ walking the earth. I mean, I would have put my faith up against anything. I've had a couple of, traumatic things happen to me in my life. Nothing could shake it. I was immovable as far as I was concerned, and my faith had been tested. And yet, when I realized the truth of what I was dealing with, which does come right back to Genesis 6, I was devastated. I had a spiritual crisis. I did not understand how entities could be given authority over my very soul to transfer my soul, my own consciousness, everything that is me out of my body and do with it whatever they wanted, it seemed to me at the time. And I specifically remember a teaching about Genesis 6. And I was a Calvinist. I'm sure people have heard me say that before, a very nuts and bolts Christian. Very much a don't look too far in that direction or in that direction, just stay on the road, the narrow road. And I remember teaching from Genesis 6. And with Genesis 6, you have the Seth line theory and you have the angels, the sons of God theory. And I was taught the Seth line theory. And I was taught this by a gentleman who had so much admiration and adoration for the holiness of God. He just could not conceive of the possibility that these creations, even though they were capable of falling away and being cast out of wherever this realm is of heaven, that they could copulate with human women was just such an abomination to his very being. And so I understand the reason why he taught this way, but I think he was also convinced of it. So it's the Seth line that the sons of God are not really referring to the fallen angels. So that's how I was taught. When I realized what I was dealing with, and I realized, oh man, this is actually the fallen angels that are behind this entire phenomenon that we call aliens. Those are just the avatars that have been created to interact with us in the 3D, possibly even to circumvent the very rules that we're discussing right now. The demonology rules, and you can't cross the salt, and a prayer should send these things away. They don't have to send away some biological avatar that was created exactly for this purpose, to snatch women out of their beds and to actually circumvent the entire process with the genetic manipulation that they're doing now, which is much more sophisticated than Genesis 6. So
yeah.
if I had been taught and look, I think that the entire journey of my soul had happened exactly the way it did. But if I had been taught Genesis 6, I probably wouldn't have had the extreme spiritual crisis I went through. Gosh, I'm going to be coming up on a couple of years now. So the one thing I will push back on just a little bit is there is some documentation in the abduction literature of them coming up with a workaround on women who have had hysterectomies, believe it or not. So I believe there was a time that they were letting those women go, and then they came up with an artificial womb to continue to use those women. So let's go down that rabbit hole potentially, Michael. Why would they need human women when they have artificial wombs? They seem to leave these progeny inside human women for, I've had it as little as, near as I can tell, as little as 4 weeks, up to 3 to 4 months. Generally speaking, why do they need us at all? Why aren't they just doing artificial in the petri dish, send them into the womb, into their artificial wombs with that liquid, and let them grow from there? Why do they need us? They take our human eggs, they take the human sperm, they take alien so-called DNA, they put it all together. But why do they need the human woman and the human womb, and even an artificial human womb for women who have had hysterectomies? And now I'm the one rambling, but this is a very important question. Now we're getting into the whole idea of metaphysics. Is the soul attracted, only to a human woman? Can they not attract a human soul to these artificial wombs? Do they trap that soul inside? Are these hybrids even capable of housing a soul? Those are the questions that I ask myself.
And I've asked this many a times with different, I've asked Nathaniel, I may have even asked you about this particular thing. When we look at the phenomena at abduction cases, what we that have been accounted for, it seems like women are taken a lot more. Yes, men are too. But women are studied and analyzed a lot more, especially with the fetus. But I think it boils down to, like Nigel Kerner talked about, and so many others, with the soul. But I think that these beings, entities, whatever they are, they they possibly do not have a soul, and maybe that's our soul, are the light that we, just everything that makes us human, love, laughter, our experiences, everything that make that spark within the human race is what they're after. And the best thing that they can think of is the soul. I think they may want to try to self-replicate it or steal it or hijack it. And the best way to do that is to, I brought this up before. I don't have the actual question that I've raised before in another podcast, but if they can keep a woman in a perpetual state of fear. That's why I think these entities, these NHIs or whatever, possibly are working alongside some of these elite factions in the world, the mainstream media, whatever. Everything's doom and gloom. Keep us in a perpetual state of fear because we're more easily controllable if we're in that constant state of fear. So let's look at the woman aspect. If we're in a constant state of, if that woman's in a constant state of fear, and if she's pregnant, maybe there's a hacking of the signal from the fear mechanism whenever the soul incarnates into the fetus, into the baby. And maybe that's, I'm not smart enough to understand that, but I know there's possibly something with that, with the hacking of the soul that's incarnating into the baby with the pregnant woman. So that's why they keep us in a perpetual state of fear, anxiety, stress, depression, wars, nuclear disaster, everything. And then they take these women on board, and they study and analyze them. How can we learn? They're trying to, I don't know, learn how to possibly extract the soul or copy the soul or something. It may not be an original copy of the soul, but maybe they can have like a knockoff great value brand of the soul, maybe what, I don't know. Go ahead, Nathaniel, and then Fringe can take it from there.
Well, I mean, we'd have to define what the soul is. I mean, a lot of the demonology and biblical literature, the soul itself was understood not just as the consciousness, but as the body it inhabited. So that's why in funerary rites, you would look at some of the, what are they called, steles, where you're looking at the sarcophagi, and it's made in the image of the soul possessing it. And so ancient authors would look at that as the soul, both the body that's inhabiting and the entity within. But with respect to what they're creating, I think it's fascinating. One hypothesis I've been toying with as of late is that even within necromancy and biblical antiquity, the phenomenon was appealing primarily to women, not because they were inferior or superior. They had a gift. And within this, it's fascinating because the phenomenon would literally segregate them and manifest to them. This is why we have the Witch of Endor, where only this individual could see the entity and communicate. And with respect to your theory, Fringe, it's incredible because you're exactly right. It appears that the phenomenon could be creating their own mediums, to where you have a biological avatar that doesn't play by the same rules they do. It doesn't have to. It's a medium. And so in linguistics, they were called the Uv, which was, this is fascinating, it was the ancestor or the possessing spirit. And that's one definition of the Uv. And then the second definition was the biological avatar or statue it manifested, possessed as. And so it could possibly be not just the biological avatar, but quite literally them creating a medium to where they can control. They don't, again, we're thinking psychics. Okay, right? Psychics. No. What if that is the modern medium? And in that way, all they have to do is possess it to communicate. And I think it's a profound point that Fringe made, because there is, I have this kind of cognitive dissonance where I'm trying to take the phenomena and say, okay, you've got to play by these rules, right? I'm going to say the name of Jesus, you're going to run into the shadows. And when that doesn't happen, I know you were on Israeli News Live, Fringe, and you hit it on the head, where people start to, weaponize that situation, make you feel incredibly inferior, and just, it's ignorant. Forgive me, it's ignorant, because they don't get it. But it's very possible again that this entire self-replication of species has been designed to create the biological medium, something they can possess and operate through. And I think that may be why our ancestors interpreted it as such. It's not just the possessing entity. It's not just the host. It's the parasite within the host. And this is why it's so profound, because when some experiences are interfacing with these entities, it's like, okay, yeah, you're a demon until it's not. And you see what I consider to be the proto-intelligence manifest. And now you're thinking, what is this? And to kind of end that point, that's why it's inherently dangerous to conjure. In Fringe mentioned earlier with the Ouija board or even CE5, because if in fact what we're dealing with plays by no rules, it's just throwing it out there. And if it is using these religious archetypes that, we suggested earlier in the show, it's possible that it has allowed us to believe certain things only to interface with us and engage with us as a species. And then when that proto-intelligence manifests, all of our senses are evaded, and we're encountering something we literally have no vocabulary for. But it could be a medium or the new medium.
Go ahead, French.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it. So for me, when I first realized what I was dealing with, and how I realized what I was dealing with was because, again, that whole transferring of the soul. Well, what is the soul? Our consciousness, our astral body. For me, when I say that, it's the entirety of who I am. They can take it out of this physical body and they have put me into what I have perceived as a computer screen or a television screen or some type of AI. They've put me into clone bodies. They've put me into other people's bodies. I have done this whole flying the spaceships thing. I have tested equipment. I have done all that super soldier stuff. So it all had to make sense to me. And I just had to think, wait a minute, where do these aliens fit in? I thought these things were from outer space, extraterrestrials from outer space. Why would they be interested in my soul? Why are we seeing them in the afterlife? I had an incident where I was shown what I believe at the time was part of the recycling process. Again, I don't take anything they show me at face value. I'm kind of always looking for what would the motive behind that be? What could that, get me to do or get me to believe? But it was this needing it all to make sense. And again, I get a lot of stuff just plopped into my head, like these Dropbox download things, the same thing that probably happens to Tim Taylor, only I don't have any patents. These ideas are then kind of just plopped into my head. Oh, well, these are just avatars. And, they're just being used. They're just the new iteration of what's been taking place for thousands of years. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me. And when we get to this whole idea that all you have to do is call out the name of Christ and this will stop, which is absolutely not true, because I, at some point in my life, was the ultimate Christian, just doing everything right. And I had the most faith I could possibly have. And yet when I encountered these creatures, and at that time it was shadow beings I was encountering, they didn't go anywhere for anything. There was nothing I could say or do. And so, well, why would that be? Are these just avatars that are actually now outside of those laws of physics? Are they outside of the universal laws, the laws of the universe that we don't quite understand? So that's kind of, where that came from. I'm not saying it's 100%, but it makes a lot of sense to me. That doesn't mean it's true and real. But the idea that women are taken, or more often are the focus of the phenomenon, I kind of tend to agree with that. I was actually asked on another podcast, why does it seem like women are taken more often? And I thought, well, wait a minute, on women, they're actually monitoring the cycle. I'm in touch with an abductee who has it down to the day. They take her X number of days before this and X number of days after that, and before ovulation and this and that and the next thing. And I just thought, well, when it comes to men, maybe because what they do with men, they can actually get a lot of resources from what they are able to harvest from a man. Whereas with a woman, they're getting one egg from a woman. and why they don't turn that into multiple eggs. You know, they seem to be master geneticists, so I don't always understand why they're doing what they do. So I thought of it that way, but I'm very interested in what Nathaniel is saying. You know, there might be other reasons for it. It might be that the phenomenon is attracted to women. And what are those reasons? Because they are mostly just trying to propagate themselves, it kind of seems like, and they want us to be enthralled by them.
Yeah, that's the incubus, and it's so fascinating you brought it up because in incubi versus succubi literature, we have more cases of the incubus than we do of the succubus. I think of one in the medieval period where a virgin, a man, young man, I think he was like 22 or something, virgin, was taken and given a child. This is what bugs me. People are like, oh, it's modern. It just this phenomenon just showed up in the 60s. And I'm thinking, oh, and Michael's heard me make this point before. Yeah, your research may have shown up in the 60s, right? Doesn't mean they have. But with respect to this case study, it's fascinating because he went to his clergy and said, look, I've got a problem, and it's a significant one. I don't understand it. Here's my account. And he just said, okay, they gave me a child. And he goes, what I don't understand was how can I be a father and a virgin at the same time? So, and this is again, this gets back to the sexual pathology with, you know, angels in Genesis 6. They didn't understand it because again, you could see them replicating, but they were trying to kind of decipher it, psychoanalyze it. Oh, they were attracted to them. Again, it could be purely genetic, and it could be, which obviously you hit the nail on the head. They're incredible geneticists. But with respect to their victimology, it's fascinating because they are like serial killers. And they are known not just to, like, for instance, with the schedule, I had an Incubus case study where it was crawling in bed with her at night. And the husband didn't believe her at first. But then he was in bed as the bed began to move. An invisible entity is present. And I asked them during that case study, I said, okay, is it like on a time period? Is there a schedule here? Absolutely. Every October. What? Every October. And so, yes, it's disturbing, but for whatever reason, the victimology is primarily female. And I think obviously I can highlight the nuance of them wanting to self-replicate. But have been cases where it's they have a hysterectomy and they don't care. They're still taking. And if this is not a non-local entity, I don't know. But my point is this: yes, their interest is been noted throughout history as primarily female, and even in antiquity, they prefer to appear to them more. To the point, like I said, where nobody else could see them, just the experiencer. And that's kind of a unifying factor in demonology, all of it. And I don't know why. It's interesting.
Since we're still on that topic, kind of with the soul, of course, these entities, and we're talking about more in the ancient past, because yes, this phenomenon didn't start in the 60s or 2017. You know what I mean? But so with Nigel Kerner, I had the privilege of interviewing Nigel Kerner about a year or two before he died. And he's man, his philosophical standpoint on the phenomena, it's almost like you have to reread his material to even get it. It's so deep. And I don't agree with everything he says. But the thing is, he brings a lot of important information to the table. I don't know if it's technically artificial intelligence that these grays are. I don't know, but they do act very AI-ish. You know what I mean? But so this is a quote from his latest book before he died, Gray Aliens and Artificial Intelligence. Quote, but there would be problems to overcome to make us suitable for their purposes. The state of the first atoms would have had to devolve enough to allow them to latch on. Prior to that point, these original human beings would have slipped the alien grasp as they were more spirit or ephemeral and less matter based. This is why hybridization could occur only with the devolved hominid lines at that point, the experiment by the Greys began, an experiment aimed at providing them with a bridge from the purely physical into the metaphysical, from atoms to spirit, and thus to soul. And their primary means of accomplishing this involves control of the soul at death and control over the formation of the new body for that soul's next physical lifetime while it is still in utero. End quote. Since you ended that, Nathaniel, I guess you can start this one, Fringe, and Nathaniel can feed off of you.
Well, I've read, I think he read at least 2 books, and I did go through those books, and I agree with you, Michael. I had to go through them a couple times to even understand what he was saying, but there was just a few things that really stood out to me with him. One of them is, as I was laying there several times, so to back up just a little bit, I used to look at my experiences as very supernatural, paranormal, once I realized the aliens and the shadow people and all that was related. And then as I could lay there and just try to analyze what was going on, there was a period when I realized there's some type of AI involved in this. Now, is it this ultimate AI? Is, whatever we want to call the evil side, Satan, Lucifer, 2 different beings apparently, but whatever's in charge of the evil side, is it actually an AI? Are we living in some type of holographic construct? I don't know. Ultimately, the end of that could be AI as we would think about it. I understood in several moments during my own abductions that AI was involved. But to get back to the soul stuff, what are they doing? What is their ultimate goal? So the aliens themselves will tell abductees that they're actually trying to take over the planet Earth, right? They're going to seed their hybrids onto the planet and usurp human beings. There is the potential that these hybrids actually give off more psychic energy and more etheric energy than we do as humans. So they could actually replace us as their own cattle. While at the very same time, the hybrid body becomes the ultimate soul trap. I'm not sure if either one of you have heard me actually talk about this, but again, I'm in there. It's a telepathic environment. I'm absorbing a lot of information. I try to sift through it, because it's not all true and real. But the idea that they are involved in recycling and that they could create a human hybrid that they have almost ultimate control over, because they don't have control over humans. They have to knock us out and paralyze us to get us to do what they want us to do. So they create these human hybrids. They're able to make them a genetic match for the human soul. And like you were saying, Michael, they seem to have at least some control over souls coming into bodies, at least in some cases. At least this is what they want us to believe. So now they potentially have a human soul almost trapped inside of a hybrid body. Now, to get back to something you said earlier, these hybrids, many, if not most of them, have no capacity for love and for empathy. They're just very robotic. If you think about a human, they don't even feel very human. They might look really human now, but they don't feel very human. They seem to have some stunted emotions. And I think these emotions have actually been problematic for them in general, but they now have potentially a human soul trapped inside of a hybrid body. And that human soul now has no capacity for love. It doesn't have capacity for empathy. It doesn't have capacity for the things that actually make us human. A human will give a shirt off their back to a homeless person. A human will give his last meal to a dog on the street. Those are the qualities of humans that are irreplaceable. The aliens certainly can't duplicate it. And so we've now taken the human qualities, the human soul, we've put them into a hybrid body and essentially trapped the human forever, because the hybrid soul, or the human soul trapped in a hybrid body, has no capacity for the things that make us human. It's not going to search for God. It's not going to search for anything outside of the alien agenda. So I love Nigel Kerner. I love the idea of the whole soul trap, the whole prison planet thing. And this is how I think it makes sense to me. I actually get a bunch of downloads on it, but again, I try not to trust that too much. But but they do lead me down some rabbit holes. So what I'm looking at is, what is the ultimate agenda? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to accomplish? And I think it's a possibility that it is literally the ultimate win to the game, to trap human souls inside these hybrid bodies, and game over.
Go ahead, Nathaniel.
Yeah, so that is one of the earliest concepts of Mesopotamia of a demon, I should say, was a denatured soul. And so a lot of their theories regarding the demonic was a sort of a mutated consciousness, to where it tends to be an energy source or a battery that has been denatured, stripped of everything that it was designed to be. So yeah, in my lecture at the Awakening in February, I talked about the host, the hybrid, and the copy. And this is what I've considered to be what's called necronetics. And here's why, I guess. Because a lot of the incubi cases within hybridization consisted of the plucking of one soul out of the fetus and implanting of another one. And so it's the avatar, and yes, there's another soul in it. It's all fat. It's all the same thing essentially. But there is evidence to suggest, at least within ritual magic, that it's called the red rite or the ultimate black mass, where when a sorcerer is dying, it will go and find a female victim. There's a Demonology. It will inseminate her with the fetus. That's your incubus. It will literally feed her something, a potion of some sort, to induce her into a dreamlike state, and then impregnate her with that fetus, and then hover over the fetus and pluck the consciousness out and implant their own into that body. And so, in a way, it does kind of follow at least the sexual pathology of the hybrid. But with respect to what we're dealing with, yes, there seems to be a distributed brain where we have the potential of having 5 different avatars possessed by a singular consciousness. Take it out a step further. When we're looking at possession cases in witch literature, possession to us was a form of pregnancy to them, to where with the debug phenomenon, you had cases of women being induced into dreamlike states or being abducted, being seduced, and the consciousness that had commandeered their body had actually also inseminated them with the fetus. I don't know how, but that entity did that. And what they started having were women having just hybrid memories in a way, right? We had one case study, or not we, but they did, where a woman was in Safdi, Israel, never been to France, never been to anywhere in that location of the world. And so she starts having memories that did not belong to her life experience. And so shortly after that, the rabbis and exorcists had an influx of experiencers where the entity, this is fascinating, it changed demonology, and I think it should change hybridization, at least in our eyes, where these experiencers were not just possessed by the entity, but they were showing symptoms of pregnancy. Like physically, they had what's called the Lavush method, where they put the thumb on the wrist. They felt 2 heartbeats, 2 pulses in one body. That's when they asked the profound question of, are they possessed by the entity, or are they pregnant with it? And this is why, again, I know we're all super passionate. This is particularly the trigger for my passion, because people want to say that's a good thing. People want to suggest that these experiences are out there saying, you know what, I want this to happen to me. And they don't realize that they could be potentially pregnant. Not just with the hybrid, but literally with the entity that kidnapped them in terms of consciousness. And so that's why demonology, at least, it kind of punctuated the hybridization program as possession and pregnancy as one. And yeah, so that it's interesting, but it's equally disturbing, because there's no possible way we could say that's love and light. The literally drugging into the dream state, to where the experiencer has the inability to perceive reality, and then it commandeers the consciousness. It's wild stuff, but I think that's a lot of what we're talking about.
So to interrupt, Nathaniel, now that I promise you, someone will figure out a way to perceive that as love and light. There they're really good
Oh,
at it.
absolutely.
But
Yeah, especially on Twitter, right?
they come up with, I just think you cannot possibly have a brain between your ears. So part of me, I'm going to walk that back a little bit. Part of me is very sympathetic to it because I understand the why. I understand why it's happening. I understand that the human psychology and that we just cannot possibly fathom this is actually happening. And then if it is, if we're not chosen for a good and positive experience that somehow reflects on our own egos, it turns into the whole Stockholm syndrome thing. And I also used to be one of them. I used to think these are aliens from outer space, they must be doing this for their own good, or I actually bought into the whole, oh, they're upgrading our consciousness. I did that for a few months. It's embarrassing to admit, but it's absolute truth. So I've kind of been in their shoes. But at the same time, do you need to be hit over the head to understand this is not whatever this is? And none of us probably fully understand what this is. There's a lot of mystery here that we're still trying to figure out. But whatever it is, it's certainly not good. And so many experiencers, the abductees, they call themselves contactees or experiencers, they're just duped. And I get a lot of pushback because people say things to me like, oh, she thinks she knows everything, just because she's decided that doesn't mean it's true. And they really bend over backwards to make excuses for what's happening on these so-called ships, literal. I'll skip over some of the words since we're on YouTube, I think. But the things that are happening on these ships to men, women, and children is absolutely unacceptable in anyone's world. And yet, because the aliens are doing it, we have to bend over backwards to make excuses for them. It's the entire thing is fascinating. That's probably the most fascinating thing I have found since coming onto Twitter. I came onto Twitter with a very just, hey, this is what's happening. And I could not believe the number of people who actually bend over backwards to make excuses for it. It's incredible in and of itself. It's its own phenomenon. Are we still, I think we're still recording. Are we still recording, Michael?
Yeah.
So I was talking to Heidi Hollis not too long ago in a separate space. And Heidi is, or was for a period of time in touch with beings. She believed this being was a benevolent being. I'll just be honest. I'm just going to tell you, they're all suspicious to me, right?
Absolutely.
I'm always looking for, where's the trick? What are they trying to get her to say? What do they want her to believe? Same with me. I mean, I'm the first one to say, actually, I want to go back to something here. I've got too many papers. I think we are all being acted upon at all times. So I think we are all experiencers of this phenomenon. I don't think, I think some of us have more awareness than others. Some of us might get a little bit more personal attention. It's not a good thing. But she was told by this entity that abductees, she brought up the whole soul contract thing, which I think is just a bunch of propaganda. But that abductees are actually in a soul contract with these entities. And that if we don't break away from these entities and we don't stop with their propaganda and pushing forward this love and light agenda, they will actually own us when we leave this body for the very last time. So that is I mean, there's nothing more important than that. There's nothing more important than an abductee realizing, wait a minute, maybe this is not for my own good. Maybe they're not upgrading humanity. And not only that, if I don't break out of this nonsense and at least try to push back a little bit, which brings more problems, they could actually own us at the end of this life. So I always like to put that out there. I try to say it, well, I don't say a lot of things gently, but it's one of the things that kind of drives me because it's so incredibly important. People think they're just going out and calling UFO down from the sky. Somehow we've
Hello,
become
CE5.
convinced. What's that?
I said, hello, CE5.
Yeah. Somehow we've become convinced and we've equated psi abilities or the ability to call a UFO, we've equated this with spirituality. They're two very different things. But somehow if we have psi abilities or we have precognitive dreams or we can fly friggin' alien spaceships, we've equated that with spirituality, and it makes us special and important. And so many people want to be able to call in these ships because it means we're superior to our peers. And this is just a full-on ego tag to me. Just calling in UFOs is coming from the aliens themselves. So we might just want to question that. You know, why do they want us to do this? What is their motive? It's not to make us more spiritual. I can promise you that.
You have anything to say, Nathaniel?
Absolutely. I completely concur. I'm not even sure it's us who's conjuring them.
You and I have discussed this a pretty good bit.
Yeah. Well, you know all my good stuff. All right. I'm using the highlights here. No, honestly, yeah, because there is a profound amount of evidence where some of these individuals are being guided to the location. And they're thinking, oh man, it's cool. I just made the decision. I have free will. And it's not. And so it's like, Tim Taylor and a host of other conjurers where they go to the location of the phenomenon's choosing and they don't realize it. And by the time they perform everything, I mean, even with good intentions, I mean, let me take a side step here. Since when does our intentions determine theirs? This is, again, the propaganda that was first discovered by early demonologists, draw a circle of salt. If you have good intentions with the entity, they'll have good intentions with you. That's never been the case. And to kind of like, I don't know, stand on my own soapbox and rant, the same people that are telling us that are the same people that are locking their doors, teaching their kids not to touch strangers or, not to trust strangers with candy. They don't even follow their own logic regarding people that we can quantify, that we know about. And you're right, in terms of this phenomenon, it does seem to be that a lot of these conjurers are being summoned to conjure. And this is what the Collins elite realize, that a lot of these people are being groomed by this intelligence, and they realize it. They're not thinking, they're being thought for. And by the time they get this ego trip, wow, okay, no, it's the illusion of control. And this is, again, I put this in my lecture at the Awakening, where I give this kind of allegory, if you will. It's symbolic, deeply, of the Iranian spider-tailed viper, where in order to capture its prey, which was a bird, it evolved and created it. It diversified itself into it was a spider-tailed snake. And when you look at it, it's flipping its tail in the sun. And so its prey, the bird, is looking down thinking, you know what, this is what I want. This is what I want to eat. And so the phenomenon learned that in order to conjure us, it could appear as what we were wanting to conjure. And they need to understand that interface, because by the time that bird pounced on the spider, or should I say the guide, right? Pounced on the guide, or the good ET, or the demons we could control. By the time the bird pounced, it realized that there was an exchange of intelligence between the tail and the predator. And now the rules they had applied to the spider no longer can be applied to the snake. And this is the impending danger, even. When people get out there and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and conjure this. No, by that point, you've been lied to. Because even with Jerry Marzinski's work, with respect to drug addicts and mental health issues, there are some people that are driving cars and going into places they didn't even know existed, because the phenomenon literally guided them. And this is, again, deeply concerning to me, because all of this is interconnected. And I'll shut up. I don't want to take all the time here, my little rambles, but it's all interconnected to ancient idolatry, because it's like, okay, we're supposed to believe that the primordial man stokes his fire in the middle of the night, decides to extinguish it, goes into his house, pulls out a metallic implant and carves the name of a demon into it. That's weird. And then implants that into a corpse, and the phenomenon literally commandeered that avatar. Possession and pregnancy, right? It's all in that was his decision? No. And so in many cases, a lot of these people, again, you hit the nail on the head, Fringe, where in order to be promoted in their species, it's almost as if they're being summoned to conjure. And it's in those moments they're being lied to. Not only are they not in control of this, at the point it manifests, they don't even know what it is. They don't even know what rules it abides by. So it's very dangerous.
And this kind of,
Sorry, Michael.
oh, you have something to add, French?
I don't. It's just more rambling, and they have no idea what the implications and the consequences
No.
could be.
No.
They think they're gaining a spirituality, they're gaining some ego, they're gaining feeling special, that they have these special powers, and they are literally trading their soul, their very essence, for these superpowers. It's no different. It's the same trade of technology and knowledge.
Yeah.
For our very souls, for ourselves. There's not a better word for it, for our very essence.
And this kind of segues into what I was wanting to talk about, and it kind of relates what we're talking about. I didn't even know I was going to even cover these notes right here. I like to be well prepared, because if I don't write things down, man, I will forget. But so this could either go towards the love and light, conjuring these entities, kumbaya, and it could also relate to Fringe, myself, and Nathaniel, and others that like to study also the darker side of the phenomena. So, how do we know that our thoughts are our original thought? How can we discern the possibility that our thoughts aren't being implanted within our subconscious psyche by these entities? On top of that, how do we know these possible transplanted thoughts by these entities aren't giving us a false representation of what our theories are on the phenomena? Could our thoughts on the phenomena be a type of mask implanted by these entities to keep us on the wrong track in trying to find answers and truth to the phenomena? Us that like to study the darker side of the phenomena also, and the love and light. Go ahead, Nathaniel, and then French can take it from there.
I think for me, it's very easy. The phenomenon pushes back. If you get too close to the veil, if there is one, the phenomenon pushes back. I remember doing a little bit of research in Mesopotamian demonology, and I felt the phenomenon. I felt it in my office. It was almost like it materialized. You could cut it with a knife. And I realized that as I was seeing into it, I was being seen into myself. And within a 2-hour period, I got 2 different emails from experiencers, both of them, word for word, the same thing. My guides told me to tell you that they'll be waiting for you when you die. So people I've worked with in the UK have faced the same manifestation. Once when you get on their radar, you're not a propagandist. You're actually doing good work. When you get on their radar, it's not because you're doing their bidding. It's because you've poked a hole in a lot of the propaganda, and you're a threat. Barbara Bartholic was told in no uncertain terms, your work, where you're due for an adjustment. In some individuals I worked with in the UK, they were studying Babylonian demonology, and they have profound manifestations. I'm talking about like in the house on their cameras, their security cameras. Both of them were haunted by the phenomenon in the same night, to the point that the next morning, one called the other and said, by the way, did you experience anything weird? And so again, this is what concerns me when it's all love and light. Right, it's all love and light because they're not worried about you. You're literally feeding into the propaganda. But for those who of us who, again, are trying to push the beast back in the darkness, absolutely. And it's not just us. Even if we get into Lou Alessandra, Jay Stratton, and people in our own federal government, investigating this in terms of threat analysis, it draws a certain response from the phenomenon. And that from my perspective, rather, that can only be because we're starting to see some of the truth here.
Go ahead, French.
So this kind of goes to a statement Whitley Strieber just made, I think, on Danny Jones' podcast. And he kind of threw it out there that people like Travis Taylor, I'm not sure if he named names, but I think he might have named names. I don't remember. But people in ufology could be the unwitting and actually puppets, and they don't even know it, and they're just spitting propaganda of the aliens themselves, and they have no idea that they're spitting out this propaganda. So your question being, how do we know our thoughts are our own? First of all, we need to have an awareness that it's even possible. I was in my 50s before I realized that these entities could actually insert thoughts into our minds. And when I say something like that, I sound like, oh, I could have schizophrenia, or maybe I need to go to a doctor and get on some type of psych med. So I don't say it very often, but I think if we just knew all of our thoughts are not our own, it just starts with awareness. So the second I knew that this was true, it became very, very easy to actually discern and to filter out the thoughts that were actually not mine. So the second I was made aware of it, I knew it was true, and I was immediately able to recognize it. Now, they might get 2 or 3 seconds, 5, 10 seconds, sometimes if I'm not paying attention. If I'm doing something, driving or on some kind of subconscious level where I don't have my full awareness present, they might get a little bit further down the road. But it is now extremely easy for me to pick out a thought that might not be mine and evacuate it from my head. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm beyond manipulation by the phenomenon. I question almost every single thing I do every single day. Without, being paranoid or living in fear all the time, I'm constantly asking myself, is what I'm saying propaganda? Am I pushing a message that they want me to push, and they have somehow used some type of reverse psychology to get me to do it? And so for me, just being aware that it's possible, I'm not sure if you guys saw the pushback on that post. People went crazy on that post, and a bunch of different quote posts and a bunch of different threads.
Oh yeah, with
off of
Whitley's.
that. And it's the ego that's just coming up within us and saying that this is not possible.
You talking about that post with Whitley, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And
Oh
I
yeah,
saw
Yeah.
it really rubbed people the wrong way. And I saw people say, oh, people think they know this and that and the next thing. And it's just, our egos have a very difficult time accepting that we are not our own masters, and that we could be being acted upon by these largely unseen forces. And so for me to roundabout answer your question, I think the very first step is awareness that it's even possible. And then once I was aware, I was able to immediately identify thoughts that were not my own. And again, if I'm off, not paying too much attention, they can come in, and the second I'm paying attention again, like, no, I don't think so. Get out. I literally just give them the middle finger and just go, pack your stuff and just get out, because it's not happening. So, but again, does that mean that I'm now entirely too confident of being able to recognize these thoughts, and they could be sneaking in another way? So I'm always, keeping that possibility in mind as well. I don't want to get to a place where I think, that they can't get me from these different sides, because they absolutely can.
Yes. And that's the reason why I interview all types of people, even people I may not agree with, because whenever you think you have all the answers and the truth, that's a dangerous road to go down, and beware of people that act like or say that they have all the answers and the truth. They might not literally say that, but the way they present themselves, it's like, I am the gatekeeper. You know what I mean? But to kind of go on what I was saying, if these entities are master deceivers that can hide behind a mask and manipulate one's thoughts and synaptic nerve center, how do we know our perception on the phenomena is the correct rabbit hole to take? They may make certain individuals in the community have a love and light perception on the phenomena. But the thing is, could it be another tactic? I know we kind of talked about it, but could it be another tactic to where they want to keep us? And both of you already kind of touched on what you think, but to go deeper, I think it's just another tactic, another variable at play, another card on the table that to keep us distracted, even though one side, the dark side, studying the darker aspects or the love and light side, may have bits and pieces of truth, but they don't want us to join our material. And that's, I don't know. I feel like there's some kind of deception going on. But the thing is, I've interviewed so many people, and you get all these different thoughts and ideas, and it's just a constant head spin whenever you try to understand what the deception really is. What do you think, Nathaniel, if you had anything to add to that?
I don't trust what they say. I trust they do, and very little of that. This is why, again, it's like studying a serial killer with many aliases, right? And I think, with that said, I think the phenomenon realized that some of these archetypes are being seen through. They're being vetted. They're being tested. With there's one case study where the guide itself was a deceased ancestor, right? And if it appeared as deceased ancestor, and so that's the archetype. The phenomenon wants us to believe they're all ghosts, right? And then when this experiencer begin to realize, okay, yeah, you look the part, you're trying to blend in as the part, but your behavior betrays you. And I think that the phenomenon evolved according to our awareness of it, to the point that it grew tired of being vetted. Now it creates a new archetype that cannot be vetted outside of behavioral patterns. That is the extraterrestrial. It's almost like it created a new character in a game.
Yeah.
And then, but it still has the same attributes. the same methodologies, behavioral patterns, and the same victimologies even. This is why, at least with considering, I should say, the unified field theory, if we're going to suggest that this is a singular intelligence, at least in the negative aspect, then it would make sense as to why they incarnated as demon and all of this. And then now we have something that, okay, how do you vet it? Based on phenomenon. Let me give you a miracle to validate the truthfulness of my message. And this is what bugs me about a lot of this is that, okay, the aliens are telling me the truth. Why? Because I caught an orb on film. Guys, and I'm getting worked up here, but look at this. The problem is that a lot of these individuals do not have a background in demonology or phenomenology. And it's kind of, the propaganda is baked into the lie that it's a modern phenomenon. Because if it's modern, I only have to look and consider modern case studies, not case studies that precede the 60s. And in that propaganda, that's the lie. It's not until you bring the experiencer of the incubus in with the hybrid mother that you realize, oh my God, we've been lied to. And so that's what it is. At least in my perspective, they realized the only way we could stop getting vetted is to introduce a character to where even if we ask the questions and got the answers, we don't even have the scientific method to validate it. Anyways. So again, looking at not the compartmentalize the phenomenon, but looking at the dark side as a singular intelligence. Okay, all right. If you're a demon, if you're an alien, seems like you're abducting the same people. The scatology, even, what they're taking, secretions and excretions, are the very same thing we see in witch literature. The exact same. The only difference is we're being told it's new. And so I think that the people that are being the most manipulated are the people that are approaching this phenomenon as if it's modern, it's novel. That's a sign to me where I'm like, okay, is it? Tell me why. And they give you the story. It's like, okay, the research and the phenomenology is not matching up with the propaganda. And so that's why it's important. Anyways.
Anything
Fringe
to add,
design,
Fringe?
man, you guys are getting me all pumped up and excited. I'm just rambling.
You have anything to add, Fringe?
And I think those same people really look down on anyone who has more of an ancient view of this phenomenon. Yeah. People who are religious, we're just ignorant and silly, and we're not educated, and all of that. So for me, it was my own personal experiences that made me realize, because again, I'm always looking for that reverse psychology. Could they be doing X, to get me to do Y and, to make me think Z? So for me, as long as I was enthralled by the love and light, I was just having your regular, average, everyday abduction experiences. And by the way, those are not pleasant, but you have a lot of abductees saying, well, they made me feel peaceful. And this is, to upgrade their DNA. They're just a dying species. They're taking us when we're asleep and they're wiping our memories for us, to make us more comfortable. The whole Elizabeth April thing that they're upgrading us. We're all about to go to 5D, all of that nonsense. As long as I was somewhat enthralled by that narrative, they left me alone, except for your average everyday abduction, which I know sounds ridiculous. The second I started questioning the narrative is when the punishments ensued. And when I did not get back in line, they pulled out every single stop there was. And I won't go into it on YouTube. I definitely don't want your channel to get pulled or the video to get pulled. But these are things that are inexcusable in anyone's world and things that an ET should definitely not be doing. And they actually let me know I was being punished. So it was unambiguous. This was not something I just drew up in my own mind. The entities let me know. They wanted me to know that if I did not toe the line, the punishments will continue. And so again, I could say, okay, is this some weird reverse psychology? But that actually makes no sense. So as long as I toe the line of the love and light, everything was chill as it can be as an abductee. But the second I started pushing back is when the punishments ensued. So could it be some strange, weird reverse psychology? Yes, and I do keep that in mind, but it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, and it doesn't serve them any good. There's no motivation there that I could find. And so that's what keeps me grounded. So I'm constantly asking myself, could they be right? Am I being manipulated? Am I manipulating others? Is the phenomenon manipulating others through me? I'm constantly making that assessment. And at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, it just makes no sense. And it's not logical. And so I cannot find the end game there. I can't find the motive. That's not to say that a week from now, it won't suddenly hit me in the face and I won't have to come back on here and say, oh my gosh, you guys, I was so wrong. And I will do that if that were to happen. But I just don't see it. I continue. And again, my journey is complicated. I try to put it in very simple terms for people to understand. It's not as simple as what I'm saying. I'm just kind of trying to give you the basics on what happened and what lets me know that I am on the right track.
So I said 90 minutes. Let me ask one last question. I meant to bring this up earlier, but we kind of segued into another area. But since this is towards the end of the show, I want to bring it up now. And we kind of all discussed a little bit about this, but Dr. Stella Emanuel has discussed how these entities can cause all sorts of physical and reproductive issues like fibroids, miscarriages, and infertility. How exactly do they accomplish this? And how can a disembodied spirit and or alien entity have that level of influence over someone's physical body and autonomy? Had these entities learned over the millennia how to hack one's genetic code where that individual has like a residual cosmic virus left over by these entities? Go ahead, Nathaniel, and then Fringe can end the discussion from there.
This has remained a problem within my own research because every time you seem to corner a model of the phenomenon, it transcends it. So with respect to how it's incarnated, there seems to be a combination of consciousness and technology. We see this even within esotericism. This is fascinating. And Eliphas Levi quote said that we have materialized spirit. Now we need to spiritualize matter. And even some of the implants themselves being alive, having their own metabolism. A lot of this does seem to stem from ancient esoteric rituals where they combine consciousness with the metal object itself and then implanted that into the body. And so, again, consciousness and technology seem to be melded together. And that doesn't make any sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. And I think this is why we're starting to see AI, and that's at least some of the closest models I've seen to the hybridization program, where you have the software and the hardware, but who runs the hardware? The software. Hardware literally is just an interface sometimes. But I don't know. I have no idea. That's a disturbing aspect because
it may be a reason. I don't mean to interrupt you, Nathaniel,
Yeah.
and I tried not to during this discussion, but I gotta say it. And maybe this is the reason why so many people seem burnt out. They are schizophrenic, or are they really schizophrenic? My wife, she's a mental health nurse. She's been she's been working mental health for, I don't know, 10 years now. But what if they're so burnt out on a soul level, on the very fabric of their nature, genetic makeup, because of maybe these entities left, and there's like a residual, like something, like a residual virus or something that's implanted in these people, and they almost act like a non-player character, NPC, and it's almost like these entities came in, like walk in, and they did their job, complete, boom, on to the next one.
Very plausible. Very plausible. It's some of the earliest theories about possession was that it was pathogenic, that it was like a parasitic entity that would stretch its consciousness inside. Now, that's where I'm leaning towards, at least that model. That sure, we could sit there and not, you mean Fringe, obviously, but people in the field could say, okay, yeah, they're extraterrestrial. What about the consciousness in them? Even some of the implants with respect to Roger Lear, when they finally tested them, most of them, if not all, had not characteristics, but ingredients that are found here on Earth. And so, I don't know. I mean, if they know when people die with respect to like Betty Luca, with Ray Sanford, not Ray Sanford, it was Raymond Fowler, his book on that, where she's abducted, and when she returned back home, her body suffered PTSD. She didn't understand it. She knew she was remembering something, but she had a hard time. She went under regression, calls Ray Fowler and says, listen, they told me my kids are going to die. They did. So the disturbing part is obviously they know when people die. And that may be, and I'm just going to throw this out there, and that may be because they're the ones doing it.
That's a scary thought.
I don't know.
What floor is yours, Fringe, and then we'll end the discussion after you get done.
Are you asking how do they hack our physical bodies? Is that what you're asking? Is that what Stella Emanuel was essentially saying?
Well, she's discussed how these entities cause, they all cause all sorts of physical and reproductive issues, miscarriages, fibroids, infertility. And could this, like, all these symptoms and all these ailments that women go through, could it be, I brought up and interjected with Nathaniel's, kind of talking about other like schizophrenic people and other mental health problems, but just to that question, women that have these miscarriages, infertility, fibroids, and all that, could these problems that women have be because these entities, they walked in, they inhabited a host, they left, rather whatever type of parasite or some type of possession, they left, and then this residual virus was left over. Maybe some of these women are having these problems,
I could see that. I guess I could see that as a possibility. I would look at it more of, I mean, they absolutely can affect us on an energetic level, on the etheric level. And I think we probably already touched on this, but it took me months of back to back to back abductions to understand that they were not always taking my physical body. It took me a long time. So I was completely unaware of any of the research. I had never heard this anywhere else before, completely unaware of demonology, believe it or not. And it took me a long time to realize they're not always taking my physical body. In fact, they're most often not taking my physical body. And so you have researchers like David Jacobs who believe every single abduction is physical. He actually won't even entertain any other possibility. And then you have people, especially Christians, who believe this is an entirely a spiritual phenomenon. And we get back into that demonology. But I really think that at least the modern version of it with the so-called alien avatars are the perfect model for interacting with us in the physical and also in the astral or spiritual realm, whatever you want to call it. And so it seems like the things that they can do to my astral body or my soul or my essence actually transfers then to my physical body. So I have been in situations where I am almost positive that my physical body did not leave the environment, and yet I returned to my physical body and I have bruises that go along with the abduction scene. So they can affect us on an energetic level. We know that, well, do we know? Okay. So the lore says that even Carla Turner was affected while she was in a spaceship. Another abductee saw the aliens administering cancer cells to her. So on a physical level, they can affect us. They make women physically pregnant. They take physical eggs from women, and they seem to be creating physical hybrids capable of living here on our planet. And this is what is so, it's so difficult to understand, because you have two separate camps. You have the nuts and bolts, you have the spiritual people, you have the no, everything is physical, and really the truth is somewhere in between. So can these entities affect us on a physical level? Yes. Is it through the mechanism that you just suggested? I don't know. I do know that a lot of researchers are looking at funguses and parasites as some type of substrate for their access, which is another fascinating area of research. I myself am on a protocol, fungal and parasite control protocol, just to see if I can stop their access to me. It's just part of the things I do to try to stop my own interactions with this thing. So I think they absolutely have the ability. Whether the mechanism you suggested is what's happening, I don't know. I'm not really familiar with anything like that, but regardless of how they do it, I think they can. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, I want to end the discussion with a Dr. Carla Turner quote. They are here. They are doing strange things to our bodies and our minds. These actions may be for humanity's benefit or for the aliens' own self-serving ends. And if we don't learn the purpose of their intrusions, we will never be more than their helpless victims. Nathaniel, Fringe, thank you very much for coming on the show, man. And woman.